Before I went on my student exchange, I thought the hardest part would be money, deadlines, and learning to survive in a new city. I was wrong. The hardest part was how naive I was about people, about myself, and about what being on my own actually means. In the last half year before I left, I worked 3 night shifts a week, studied hard to finish my exams early, and built portfolio pieces on whatever hours of sleep I had left. I did get an Erasmus grant, but it wasn't guaranteed, and it definitely didn't cover everything. That period was brutal, but I would do it all again if I could. This is my experience, the good, the strange, and the parts I wasn't prepared for. At home, my class consisted of 8 students, a tight-knit group who knew each other through and through. Here, I sat down in a big room with 60 students, among which a handful of exchange students from all over Europe and Asia. To this day, I've only gotten to know the names of a few of them. Us exchange students clung together closely, and the regular students didn't seem interested in us at all, and they clustered together too. Except for one girl, and she was a bit peculiar. And you'll learn later in this video and the next one just how peculiar she was. I'll call her Georgiana for the sake of this story. It's still Romanian and it has the vibe of her name, but it's not her real name. Georgiana laughed out loud at inappropriate times and mumbled commentary underneath her breath when the teachers were speaking. She couldn't sit still, nor sit in a normal position, and she often came into class late. And of course, in the first group assignment, I ended up in a group with her and an exchange student from Switzerland I'll call Nora? She looked like a Nora. Dreamy, timid. She was nice. The 3 of us were to make an animation of exactly 30 seconds for a book promotion. But our art styles couldn't have been more different. We had a month to make it. And 30 seconds doesn't sound like a lot, but with 25 frames a second, that's 750 images. And we needed to do everything in that month, like the concept, the writing. And with this project in the background, we also attended 3 other modules this semester. Because of the number of students, we were split for many trips, lessons and masterclasses. I had a day trip to the National Art Gallery to study paintings. At first it was a little awkward, sitting there in the gallery halls and sketching studies of these masterpieces where every regular visitor could shoot an eye at my sketchbook. I had my first live drawing session as well. I just wish someone had warned me that the model would be, I didn't mind, I just would have liked to know before I sat down there and the ropes went off. During the weekends, I wandered through central London. Rarely with a specific destination, and mostly with a healthy bit of curiosity. Allowing myself to discover things I might otherwise not have come across. Allowing myself to breathe and to enjoy the present. I met up with Georgiana and Nora in the school library at first, but as our deadline approached, our workload seemed to inflate into a mountain. And we ended up meeting up in the weekend. I wasn't comfortable bringing visitors over to the family I recently moved into, and Nora, who found her housing through the same site as I did, had ended up with a horrible landlord that had already been taking advantage over the fact that she was a young girl in a foreign country alone, by raising her under the table rent as soon as she got there. She also had a curfew and was asked to do some household chores, so she was already looking for a different place to stay. To do our project, we met up at Georgiana's place. She lived in a regular house with a few other students. She opened the door to her room and we were met with a wall that was filled with self-portraits. Not only of her face, but of a part of her body that doesn't see much daylight. Again, a warning would have been nice. She didn't even notice our utter shock, and there was no way my poker face was even remotely intact. Despite her strangeness, I came to really appreciate her unfiltered honesty, and she turned out to be a really good friend. If there is any job field in which being much different from the average person is a major advantage, it's going to be art. Frame for frame, we finished our abomination animation hours before the deadline in typical student fashion. It wasn't even worth putting at the bottom of my portfolio. I'd learned things, especially when it came to collaborations, but I wanted to get more out of this student exchange. So I started working on a side project that eventually became the basis for the style that I animate in today. I worked on this for 9 consecutive days, without a plan. There was no storyboard or script, just shot after shot improvisation. Because my old drawing tablet was driving me insane, I developed an art style at the time that didn't involve brush strokes, but I would make selections and fill them with flat colors. After finishing this, I looked into another animation direction which didn't require a good tablet. I had some experience with 3D software. Years before, I had lessons in 3D Studio Max, and I once gotten the most out of a free Maya trial as I could. But Blender is free. I needed to learn 3D modeling and animation from scratch. And although I didn't get very far, I use Blender sometimes in my projects for its particle system or to block out light in really complex scenes. All was going fine. But as a young woman being mostly on my own, I had some bad encounters as well. As the film industry is much bigger in the UK than in the Netherlands, I decided to reach out to someone in the industry. I can't even remember where online I came across this person. It was probably Twitter or LinkedIn. But he agreed to meet up with me in a cafe in central London, where he said many creatives gathered regularly. So I very naively hopped on the train, being grateful this person made some time for me in his busy schedule so I could ask some questions. I showed him some of my work and asked about how the local film industry worked for new people starting out. And this part actually gave me some useful insights at the time. The man kept drinking and commented that if I really wanted to get a foot in the door, I should consider finding a local boyfriend to move into after my student exchange. And I could almost see him pointing at himself. Which I laughed off. This guy was twice my age, a man in his 50s and a young female student. Silly man. But as the evening progressed and beer after beer disappeared into his belly, I excused myself because I still had an hour and a half journey to get home. But we needed to go to the same tube station. He begged random strangers for a smoke, explaining to me that he had quit but really craved one right now. And then at the station he leaned in for a kiss. I wasn't scared of him because he was a head shorter than me, and honestly I had lost all respect at that point. He seemed really pathetic. But for me this was a moment where I learned that older people aren't necessarily wiser or more intelligent. But I was disappointed in myself for my own naivety. Weeks later, I had an encounter with another man. And this one actually did scare me, and I didn't know what to do in that moment. Which I will cover in part 3 of this series.